Thanks for tuning in to our top 50 games of all time.
These are going to be recorded as video for our YouTube channel.
You can check that out at youtube.com/boardgamebarrage.
They say the truth is a number one stopper. They say you think, but you never want to speak up. They say you're hiding there, you're busy, but what's on your mind, kid? What's on your mind, kid? They say out loud, they will never.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Board Game Barrage podcast. This is episode number 47, and this is the second in our 5-part video series on our top 50 games of all time. So if you haven't been checking us out on YouTube, if you want to see our faces, go do that.
I think never go with a 5-part anything as an intro to something.
Exactly.
I'd say 3-part.
If this is your first time,
even
doing
just
video.
one and a sequel would be sort of advantageous.
Right.
That's a pro tip.
My name is Neilan. These are my hosts, Mark and Kalen.
Hello.
And how are you guys feeling around round 2? Good to go?
Yeah, excited to see what's on your lists and to start talking about the truly best games,
The actual
which are on my list.
Yeah.
Mine are chock full of Euro games, just wall to wall.
That's what the people
10
expect.
Euro games.
Yep.
I'm so excited to share them.
Okay, let's dive right in. Kellen, do you want to start us up today?
Yeah, so this is my number 40th best game of all time, and that game is For Sale. For Sale is a fantastic filler game, plus, I would say. There's sort of two halves to a game of For Sale. At the beginning, you are acquiring property, and at the end, you are using that property to make money. The theme doesn't...
Right.
It doesn't hold up to much scrutiny, but essentially what it is two really cool, unique... Is one of them an auction even? I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
They're...
Yeah. There's. Well, is it?
I'm not doing a great job explaining this here on the upfront, but this game is essentially a Biblios killer, which is
That's not right.
it's
Yeah.
more it's
You
both
You want to start this episode with that?
it's both more fun and there's more strategy in it.
Wow.
So that's strange.
That is wrong. You can now disregard the rest of his list.
If they don't cut this part of it out, please check out For Sale. It is a fantastic filler game that you can get everyone into. I've had tremendous success with this, and one of the things that I love about it is I've been playing this for more than 5 years at this point. This is not a flash-in-the-pan sort of filler. Yeah, that's fun. For Sale is a great game.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
good.
I totally agree. It is not a Biblios killer. Though,
I
to be clear.
agree. It is not a Biblios
There you go.
killer.
2-1, as usual.
Yeah, that is pretty normal.
My number 40 is a game that I liked quite a bit, even though I had never played the type of game that it's based on, and despite the fact that I had the worst experience possible playing it in terms of like how well I did. This is Guards of Atlantis, the tabletop MOBA by Artem Nichiporov.
Yeah, I think that's
Sounds
right.
right. So this is, as I mentioned, a MOBA style game, which is a type of video game. You've got a number of lanes you're trying to control, and you're trying to push your troops down the lane in order to get to the opponent's castle. What is it? in this game?
It's I don't know what it's called, a fortress? Maybe?
Yeah, or base.
Something
You're trying to get your
their
guys
home
over to
base.
the other side.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I had a terrible time playing it. I mean, I played poorly, and our team got rocked. Neilan was the leader of that team, so us getting rocked was
Yeah,
not
I'll
fun.
take some of this one.
I beat you even 1 versus 2.
Well, it was 3-on-3. Your
Well,
your math doesn't check out as
Right.
usual. I guess.
Selective.
Anyhow, what I love about this game is the fact that each of the characters are asymmetric, and the fact that you can sort of form your teams in a way to take advantage of the characters' differences. That seems really cool. Like each person is unique, but you can sort of create a team, and the fact that it's team versus team. I always like a team versus team game. I also like the fact or the way that your actions are handled. It's got an action selection aspect where you're putting down a card at the same time, and highest initiative goes first. And these cards can be upgraded quite a bit during the game once you have killed characters and get the money to upgrade them. I didn't experience any upgrading because I had my first kill in the very last turn of the game. But it seems like a very dynamic, very, again, asymmetrical, interesting game. So yeah, I can't wait to give it another shot. And yeah, my number 40 is Guards of Atlantis.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
a fantastic game. It's definitely going to be on my list later on. If you're a fan of that sort of genre of video games, it does a really good job of like replicating it and
Yeah.
streamlining off the edges that don't need to be there. So
Yeah, and again, even if you have never played, which I'd never played a MOBA game, and I loved it. So
Right.
Guards of Atlantis.
okay, my number 40 is a game that was on, I think, Kellen's list earlier. Is Hanamikoji.
Yep.
It's a fantastic 2-player game. Kellen already mentioned it last episode. As we said, like the things I like about it is that high stress tension where every move feels bad. Everything you decide to do, you're like, I don't know what the other person is going to do to
Right.
like wreck me. I hope
Right.
I've set this up just right. There's also something so clever about the way that the numbers just work out. Like all these actions feel so disparate. It's like one of them is use 4 cards in your hand, one of them is use 1, and then it somehow just always works out because of how perfectly designed the maths on it is. It's just a really easy to explain, high stress game that is great at 2 players. Well, it's a great 2-player
I
game.
do love it. I just missed my list, but I do like it quite a bit.
Yeah, that's Hanamikoji.
Is it number like 300 in there?
Number 83, which is high praise.
How do you know it's number 83?
'Cause I just
you
checked.
looked it up.
I always
Okay.
look to make sure you guys are not making big mistakes.
Where's
Because we make
for
like
sale?
cut.
For sale's got to be in
For
there.
sale's up there. For sale. I'll let you know
All right.
when we get back to it.
My number 39th best game of all time is a Stefan Feld game, guys.
Wow, look at this.
Whoa, it's happening. It's a Euro game. That game is Bruges. But actually, I think the true Europhiles actually don't like Bruges because it's a little wackier than some of his other games. This is a point salad. I like some salad. It has a lot of multi-use cards, which is super fun. There's suits of sort of different people. I don't know if they're villagers or what they call them in Bruges. But you're essentially using these cards and doing a bunch of disparate effects. This is a really hard to find game. I'm actually still trying to find it. I know you probably own it.
I do. I own it along with the very, very hard to find expansion, which is
Where do you store your games, Mark?
in the gymnasium.
Yeah, right.
In your gymnasium.
Yeah, that's right.
I see. Okay. No, Bruges is a game that I have only played a handful of times, but I'm always excited to play it again. It's on my list of games to pick up whenever I find it. And I like having some games in my collection that are sort of a holding a handout to you guys. Not a handout. A handout has a different connotation. But it's sort of that me reaching out to my Euro brother and saying, we can be friends. And Bruges is a good bridge for that.
That's
so
very
that is,
magnanimous of you.
thank you. Thank you, Mark.
You got it. My number, for sale was 138. Just so you know. So
For sale's better than Hanamikoji.
Well.
If you consulted the only
The
true
actual-
and living list that we have here.
my number 130. My number 139. My number 138
let's
was
go
for
up.
sale. No, my
Yeah.
number 39 is by Uwe Rosenberg. Sorry, and this is A Feast for Odin. Uwe has he's known for his farming, resource gathering, conversion games, and now he's starting to do these Tetris-style tile laying games. And Feast for Odin is sort of the meeting of both those. It was where he seemed to have gone from mainly going from those farming games to these tiling games, and this game has both in it. I remember when this game was being released, and there was a talk about this new Rosenberg game that had like 70 worker placement spots. I thought it would be like the differences would be incremental, but I think it's not quite like that. It's not like one spot is just a little better than the other, which is just a little bit better than the other. There's a lot going on in it. I like the fact that when you're gathering the resources, you can use them to feed your people or to score points, but also to place them on this Tetris style board, and you're doing it in an effort to get more resources the more and more you fill the board, but also to cover up negative points. That's the unique concept that he's used in other games now, but was novel at the time. This is his magnum opus, like maybe not his best game, but his like grandest game, because of, again, all the worker placement spots and the fact that he combined both styles of games. So 39 for me, Feast for Odin.
Fantastic game.
Have you played this?
He has. He doesn't
yeah.
love...
We have a general rule, which is like if someone is talking about something they like, someone should jump in if they also like it. So I was trying to
silent.
I was trying to keep quiet.
As quiet as
but,
possible.
But the entire premise of worker placement as a genre, right, in the upfront was to block other spaces from other players.
Yeah, I actually wanted to say that I almost don't consider it a worker placement for that reason, because it's not about blocking. Like, it's too big of a board for that. But I mean, it obviously is worker placement, but it doesn't feel
it's
like the same.
It's baby's first worker placement. That's
not-
so
I mean,
irrelevant.
that's not baby's
No,
first.
no. The
Unfair.
game itself isn't, but as a worker placement game, it defangs Agricola. It literally takes anything cutty and mean.
That's
I don't even
unfair.
think that's true.
It's,
I think
it's certainly not as like tight as Agricola in terms of like.
I mean,
but
not
there-
even in the same league ballpark.
I think
I
that's
disagree.
probably true. I think
disagree.
Agricola
I think-
is a lot meaner than
It is.
Feast
It
of-
is.
by a way.
I'm not arguing that. I just think that there are definitely spots that you want in Feast for Odin, and yes, you can. There's always like a secondary spot that's not that bad,
Right, and that's the thing I wanted to say is like people talk about the 70 work placement spots, but they're divided into columns of efficiency.
Right.
So there are not nearly as many, about a quarter of those are the
Right.
best spots that you
Right.
are competing over,
Yes.
and then there are more expensive spots.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
I've played it twice. I think I'd play it again.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine. I just, as a worker placement, it
doesn't give
takes
you what
what
you
I
want.
like
Yeah.
I
about
agree.
worker
I get
placement
that. I
can
and
absolutely see
takes
that.
that away from me.
Sure.
Okay, my number 39 is also a Stefan Feld game. Kalen.
Oh.
I think this is the highest, if I'm not mistaken, Stefan Feld game on my list. It is In the Year of the Dragon. This game, like on the first playthrough, I played this with Mark both times. Really, just I love it. It's
punishing.
so brutal. Yeah.
So it's like brutality of the game.
Right.
It's like, that's all it's about.
The whole premise is you have like I believe a year of 12 different
Yeah.
events that are semi-randomized. You have palaces that you're sort of recruiting people to of different professions. Like one is a builder, and one's an architect. There are monks, and each of them do different things in terms of giving you points or getting money and so on throughout the game. But every event, if you can't fulfill the requirements of the event, which is maybe pay X amount of money
Right.
or have this much food, then people will die in your palace. And that happens all the time.
I remember the game was explained to us.
Right.
It was like, you got to do this or people die. And then if you don't do this, people die.
Right.
Like every other line in this game, the explanation was, or
Someone
people will
dies,
die.
yeah.
Right.
So a lot of the times, like you're recruiting a person and then you're just killing them immediately
Right.
because so it's
'Cause you
just
know,
because you knew that they were never going to survive the round.
Right.
But it's a really cool game. It's got a lot of really interesting mechanics. I think one of the central ones that I like is there's a track that purely defines player order that you're moving ahead on based on what people you recruit.
Yeah.
So you're sort of constantly jostling to sort of get ahead on the track just to keep your player order in a good place because obviously getting access to the actions you need is vital. And
Right.
those actions get blocked by other players otherwise.
Yeah. And the fact that like each type of character you can pick up, you can either take the stronger version that
Right.
moves you less up the initiative track, or
Right.
take the weaker version that moves you farther up.
Yeah, it's a really clever game. Having played it a couple of times now, it's just as harsh.
Yes.
Even once you know it, but it's so satisfying because you feel like you're just on the tail edge of just like getting it right.
Yeah. Right.
And then things go wrong, and it's great.
Yeah. Not a point salad.
No,
This
not
is
a
very
point
much
salad,
not
yeah.
a Feldian point salad.
Which might be why I like it so much. That is In the Year of the Dragon. Yeah.
All right. The 38th best game of all time, Mark has never played. Isn't that a travesty with your giant list? That game is Crokinole.
That's true.
Crokinole is perhaps the greatest dexterity game of all time. It is a giant circular board, traditionally made out of wood. There are just beautiful sets of Crokinole that have been made. Essentially, you're trying to flick discs into the center to have them removed from the board, and they're sort of scoring rings in a circle. But what's cool about it is that once an opponent's piece is on the board, in order for your shot to count, you have to hit their piece. So you can't just consistently aim and try to flick it in the middle because you must hit their piece prior to it going into the middle in order for that to count. So that leads to the whole tension of the game is you're sometimes aiming at an opponent's piece that's on the complete opposite side of the board and it's really challenging to hit. And then if they don't have anything on the board, then that's when you're trying to get your kill shots just going right into the middle. I have a beautiful board of Crokinole on my wall. Actually, I have it hung on the wall, and it's like art basically. It's just like a really, really pretty. I don't know what kind of wood it is. I'm not a
Woodsman.
woodsman. Is that the word?
Maybe.
Connoisseur of wood. But it's a Helsinki board. There are a bunch of companies that make these. It's a really fun game. Have either of you played Crokinole?
I have not.
I don't think I have.
But I like the whole curling scoring sort of mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Similar.
I feel like I might have played your set at one point, but I'm not sure.
I brought it to game night once.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's massive. I had to buy a gong bag
Right.
to even transport it anywhere. So that's when you know you've gone too far, perhaps.
You ever watch on YouTube like the Crokinole World Championships?
They're insane.
The guys are just like they're just like keep hitting in the middle. It's amazing.
It's crazy
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is Crokinole, a fantastic dexterity game.
My number 38 is by Ryan and Sean Spangler. This was their first design. This is Soul, Last Days of a Star. This was sort of like an indie game. Came out of nowhere last year. At its heart, it's like an action point allowance game with some like network building. The board is concentric circles, and you're trying to basically build a route getting toward the center where most of the points are scored. There's a lot of interesting things about this game that make it one of my favorites. The fact that you've got a mothership that sort of goes around the outer edge, and all these ships move after every turn. So you're constantly moving. There's no variability to that. And it changes where your sort of base of actions are. So it adds an interesting timing effect where sometimes you want to launch ships, which is basically adding workers to the board, but you want to time it so you don't do it now, you do it later because it'll get you closer to where you want those ships to be. It's also got a variable ending that I like, so you never know when the game is going to end. In the last game we played, I had built a really pretty strong engine, but Kalen ended up with the win because he had scored more like early on, so you had the lead and it was insurmountable. And the end came fairly early, so I like that. You have to sort of adjust. And also another thing I like about it is the fact that there are a number of different powers that can be introduced in the game, and each game you select 6 of them and add it, so that adds to the variability of it. The way the game is even played, this network building, this like point scoring where you're scoring points the closer you get to the center, but also your opponents are scoring points based on where they are and what buildings they have. There's a lot of interconnected pieces that make it a really interesting game, and nothing quite like it. So yes, my number 38 is Soul: Last Days of a Star.
It's also like strongly thematic in a way that I think is pretty rare for games, where you can imagine this as a movie playing out.
Right.
It's kind of like the sun is dying and you're sending your ships in so you get enough boost to like leave the solar system, and it's just it plays the way it's described.
Yeah.
Like it's everything you're doing feels like that.
There's even a move where you can like sacrifice your ships to the
send
sun.
them into the sun for that last burst of energy. Like it's a really cool game.
Yep.
It just feels like nothing else. You know, imagine in a Euro-ish abstract game, you build a building that you want to use, and then it slowly starts drifting away from you.
Right.
And then you try to chase it for a second to you still use it, and then it's gone.
Right.
And then it's going around, and then you're just like, well, that's gone. I'm done. And then at some point, another third of the way through the game, you're like, oh, it's coming back. I can use it again. And that feeling or that thought is so unique.
Yeah.
I've never felt that way playing a game like this. It's pretty cool.
My number 38 game is Kemet. This is a dudes on the map game that I like. It's certainly not going to be the highest dudes on the map game on my list. It is a mythological Egypt setting, and one of the sort of the key features of the game is that the map is sort of, I would say, mathematically designed so that every person's base is equidistant from every other person's base. And I think Kalen's already, this is the thing you don't like about it.
Just mathematically designed as like a positive thing. Just, I grimace just a little bit.
So
not artists.
It's certainly a very specifically, cleverly designed map for that purpose. You never feel like you're isolated just because of the geography of the board like you can in a lot of games. You're always 1 or 2 turns away from attacking someone. And that's awesome because it's a game that entirely revolves around attacking. There's very little engine building or so. I mean, there are power tiles you can sort of get that give you unique abilities, but you're not getting victory points unless you're attacking in Kemet, which is also kind of neat for this style of game, because there are a lot of games where I think depending on who you play, you might feel hesitant to attack someone at the table. And if you're playing Kemet, then you don't have the option.
Yes.
Like there aren't any hard feelings because the only way you can interact with the system is to attack someone.
Yes, right. I love that about this game. Yeah.
It also has a really cool sort of card playing mechanic. Might be familiar from other games where you have a hand of 6 cards, and every time you have a combat, you will use one of those cards until you used all of them. Then you get them all back. And they have varying sort of defense and attack values on them. So finding the right card for the right combat is vital.
Famously done wrong in Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea.
Right. This is a game that I haven't played as much recently as I'd like to, because it's somewhat been replaced by more recent Dudes on the Map games for me. But I really, really like it still. And in the few times I've played it in the last few months, I've still enjoyed it. So
I think if you're into games with tech trees, this really
is a good one.
That itch of like upgrading and looking at all the different powers.
Right.
It's a little overwhelming for me, which is why I've moved away from that type
That's
of thing.
absolutely
But
true.
I'd love to play Kemet if you wanted to get it going.
And speaking of that, it does actually have one thing that probably bugs me the most about it, is that all of these tech tiles are only described using symbols that you have to constantly be referring to the manual for. And that, especially as someone that, if you've not played it before, that's extremely overwhelming. But that's Kemet.
All right, the 37th best game of all time. Is this a doctor game? Taj Mahal?
It
Yes.
is. It is.
He's
So
everywhere
good.
on
Yeah.
my
So
list. Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal was just remade in a new release, just a visual upgrade, but it's the same basic game. What's so clever and interesting about Taj Mahal is that you are using not poker hands, but essentially you sort of bid into I'm going in for elephants this round. And then the other players have to try to match or beat you. And it's sort of this war of attrition where you really don't want to fight someone else in this sort of card go around. But in order to get the special power that you want, sometimes you have to go big. And your cards are precious, precious resources. So a lot of the game is, putting out the vizier or the suit that you're looking for, and then just desperately hoping someone doesn't challenge you for it, and someone is likely going to challenge you for it, and then do you have the right mix of cards in your hand to maximize your output on each turn? It's a quick playing game for how deep I feel like it is. I've had just a great time playing it every time, just immediately wanting to run it back. Taj Mahal has been around for a long time. I know you guys have both played a lot.
Yeah,
of it.
I love
really
Taj
like
Mahal.
it. Yeah, really, really like it.
So that is my number 36?
Seven.
37th favorite game, Taj Mahal.
And that reprint is beautiful as well.
It is.
I haven't seen it.
Really good looking, good components.
You haven't looked at our Instagram, Mark?
On to my number 37 game. This is by Matt Leacock and Rob Davio. Matt Leacock of all the Forbidden games and Davio of the Legacy games. And this is the Legacy game, in my opinion. This is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. Oh, this is the third of the 4 co-ops that appear on my hit list. So that's a little for everybody taking notes at home. So I am now definitely burnt out on Legacy games. I remember when they were hitting their stride, I thought I never would be. And I thought it was just such an interesting mechanism, but now I find myself not so much. But Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is a fantastic game, and it gave me some of the greatest moments of my board gaming life. For those who aren't familiar, I'm sure most people watching this are, it's a spin on the classic Pandemic, which is probably like the classic co-op game. Mm-hmm. But the legacy aspect means that the board is changing and cards are being taken in and out of the game, and you are sometimes prompted to open boxes that introduce new characters or new components. So there's a lot of like mystery and excitement when you're doing stuff like that. It's a very well-constructed game because Pandemic is a very well-designed game. But the thing that set Legacy apart were those moments where, you know, you're naming your characters, and we did like a thing where you could only, and you're shifting characters. So you may have one guy in one round, but the next game you might take somebody else. But whenever a new player is introduced, you give them a name, and we had a rule that you had to refer to the person playing the game by that character's name, and we had like backstories and stuff. And,
costumes.
Right. Well, unfortunately, but we should have. And yeah, just the opening of the boxes. And I remember the very first game, there's a part where you have to tear a card at the end of it. And I was playing with people who are mostly non-gamers, and they weren't ready for they weren't ready for legacy games in general, but they weren't really ready for that. And I just made it a big ceremony of like, everybody look, and then I made sure they had their attention. And in the middle of the table, I just like ceremoniously like destroyed the card, and there was like gasps around the table. So
yeah, the audience cheered.
The audience is cheering based on the story.
Yeah.
So yeah, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, number 2 overall all-time game on BGG, 37 for me, but still I think a fantastic game. So that's my number 37.
One day I will play Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
I just feel like what we're seeing is that the good Legacy games are sort of built on a core of something else.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
Risk Legacy is also seen very well for those who enjoy Risk-like games, and Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is way more well-received than Season 2, which sort of does away with some of the fundamental pandemic gameplay versus some of the ground-up stuff like Charterstone and Seafall are less well-received overall. Still potentially fantastic games. It's almost like its own genre at this point.
Yeah.
My number 37, and this is one where I find it really hard to put this on my list. Where to put this on my list. That's Codenames Duet. And the reason for that is because, Codenames, I think, is no surprise, is going to show up later on some or all of our lists, I would assume. But Codenames Duet is such a weird, specific spin on it that is almost the same game, but just the virtue of making it cooperative and adding that slight little complicated twist of the things on the other side makes it somewhat less appealing to me. I think that I'll always be down for a game of Codenames because the team versus team component is so strong, and like that competition is great. But Codenames Duet doesn't always scratch the right itch for me. And it's so specific because also I think Codenames Duet is probably best at 2 players. Like you can do it in 2 teams, but I feel like it's always been best for me at 2 players. This was one that I sort of wanted to include because I admire just how effectively they translated it to co-op, but it doesn't quite hit everything I like about Codenames, just because of the added layers of complication and the cooperative nature. That's Codenames Duet.
Yeah, because you would never choose to play Duet over Codenames.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
If given the right amount of people.
Yeah, if I had the ability to play both, I would choose Codenames every single time. Yeah.
Cool. Well, my number 36 best game of all time is another 2-player sort of battle line game that's not battle line, and that is Piñata. Piñata is a new age remake of a classic 2-player game called Balloon Cup that a lot of people really enjoy. I've actually never played Balloon Cup, but in Piñata, you are using a hand of cards and playing on piñatas that you're trying to get candy, and you're trying to acquire enough candy in specific colors. And the piñatas will change. So sometimes you want the lowest total on your side. Sometimes you want the highest total on your side. And once the piñata breaks, it switches to the other side. This is a really great lighter, a little bit lighter, I would say, than Hanamikoji. One of my favorite things about Piñata is that once you've played, each Piñata can only have a certain amount of cards. And once you've played all the cards to your side, it doesn't resolve until they've played the appropriate cards to their side. And so you can just sit there knowing that you're going to win that piñata, but your opponent's just not playing the cards to resolve it, which is infuriating. And then once you've played your cards to your side, you're actually allowed to play on their side to end that piñata battle. But it's less efficient to sort of do that, so you want them to do it. What's clever about that is it makes it so you don't want to play your best card on any battle line at first because you want them to feel like they could win it. So you play like a mid-lane card so that they will play a card on the other side, and then that's when you kill them.
Yeah.
This is very light. The artwork is meh, but it has little wooden candy pieces, which is cool. It's really good. I like Piñata a lot. I would never get rid of it. Christina and I play it all the time.
Sounds great. I'd love to play it. That sounds like right up my alley.
It's good.
Yeah. My number 36 is probably the biggest outlier on my list. This was made in 1984, which is the oldest game. Are you peeking?
Oh.
You're not supposed to peek.
All right.
This is supposed to be a big reveal.
Reveal it.
1984, and this is the lowest rated game on BGG. This is a 4.6 on BGG, which is terrible for anybody who knows ratings on BGG. Designed by Hanamikoji. This is A Question of Scruples. So I know this is not for everybody. This game's not for everybody. And in fact, you need to play this with people that you know and like and trust. Because all it is asking the people around the table like moral quandaries. The way the game works, and really the best way to play this is not, keeping score or anything, but you get a card that either says yes, no, or it depends. And then you get a question that has some sort of morally ambiguous situation. And you need to pick the person around the table that you think is going to answer the question with the answer that you've been dealt. So yes, no, or it depends. And the best way to play this is when you pick the person to answer the question, you are required to explain why. And you need to flesh out why you would sneak into your boss's office or why you would not help the old lady cross the street or whatever. What I love about this game and games like it is the fact that there's a friction there because you're asking uncomfortable questions. But it also, I think in that friction, you sort of are able to bond with your friends more. You're able to like learn things about them because the Question of Scruples and games like it lead to like a lot of times more interesting conversation. Get a lot of meandering discussion, which is like fantastic. And I feel like every time I've played this game, I've gotten closer in some way with the people that I'm playing with. And I just think it's great. My number 36, A Question of Scruples.
But how do you score points, Mark?
I do not know, but one interesting thing is the guy who designed this, I'd never heard of him, Hanamikoji, and he's listed on BGG officially as a conspiracy theorist.
Huh.
So
What?
that's what he is. He's everybody known for being a conspiracy theorist now.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
there you go.
My number 36 game is Dead of Winter. I think this applies equally to both Dead of Winter and The Long Night, which is a standalone expansion. They're both good. They got pros and cons, but I think either one works. The premise of this game is it's a cooperative game where you control a number of survivors in the zombie apocalypse. It is also in the middle of winter, and you're sort of scavenging for supplies. You need to get a certain amount of food every round in order to keep people at the camp alive. You need to be getting equipment from sort of traveling to different locations and fighting off zombies that are coming in at the doors of your sort of hideout. The thing I like about this is that each player also has a hidden objective that they have to achieve by the end of the game. So in fact, you cannot win unless you both win cooperatively as a team and have completed your hidden objective. What's great about that is that you suddenly may be sneaking off to a location and no one quite knows why you're there. And the reason that that's fantastic is because there's also a chance of a hidden traitor in this game. So whenever you're doing something that feels like maybe it's not optimal for the camp, there's this question that goes around the table of, is that person the traitor or are they just off doing their own little thing? And this is a highly thematic game. Like the characters just have a lot of cool little quirks and powers. One of the main features is this thing called the Crossroads deck, which is a card that you draw every round that someone else at the table will sort of hold on to. And when a certain condition is met, either this person travels to this location or if a zombie gets killed, then read this part of the story and trigger an event. So it just adds these little sort of spikes of like storytelling to the game that feels pretty unique. And it's so full of flavor. It's a really cool little experience. I would say this was something that might have been further up my list. tends to drag
Yeah.
at 4 to 5 players. I almost wouldn't play this anymore except at 3 players, which is very specific because that's also the minimum count. So I think that makes it feel like about the right length.
I'm just happy they were honest and called the expansion the Long Night, because this game is entirely too long.
Yeah,
and ruins everyone's night.
Yeah, it's funny because I would never play this at 5. 4 is fine, maybe longer than you want it to be. And yeah, like I said, 3 is probably the right amount of time. Because I think if you played with 3 players, it would be 90 minutes, 2 hours. And that feels acceptable.
I've only played this a couple times. I feel like another thing aside from the length that I don't like so much is I feel like people's individual goals, it seems like it's a scramble at the end to achieve them. Has that have not been your experience? Like, it feels like everybody's sort of working toward the common goal, and once that seems to be achievable or whatever, towards the end of the game,
Everyone rushes?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if that's been my experience of it, to be honest. I think one of the ways that this sometimes breaks down is that at the end of the game, you might be like, okay, guys, maybe if we do my goal, that would be cool for me. And that feels a little bit out of the spirit of the game. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise, no, I haven't had that problem there.
Yeah, I'd love to do this again at 3, because as of now, it would fit on my potentially top 10 disappointing games of all time.
Yeah, I think that I remember
so much of the trappings.
Yeah,
that I want to like.
Exactly. I remember when we played it, that was a very weird game. I think you had your character die instantly on the second turn or something like that.
Right, and you were the traitor. Unsurprisingly.
It's balanced.
Yeah, and we'd be loath to talk about that game without talking about the other Crossroads game that just came out, right?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Gen 7 is the second Crossroads game. So
right.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how that works out.
Yeah.
Okay. That is Dead of Winter.
My number 35th best game of all time, so better than all of these other games that anyone has talked to this point, is a party game called Sixes. Sixes is hysterical, and the meta game that has evolved within our group is perhaps better than the game itself. Sixes is basically a categories variant. In the first round of the game, everyone is trying to match another player. So you have to write 6 things that match with airports, for example. And then anything you write down, whether that's airplane, pilot, as long as someone else at the table has written that down, you score a point. In the second round, you do the same thing, but you need unique items. So imagine that it's airports again. So people are trying to come up with Alaska Airlines, for example, as a unique example that maybe no one else wrote it. But if anyone else writes it down, you don't get that point. And then the third round is sort of a lightning round with a bunch of different categories. What has evolved in our group is sort of a diplomacy style game where we are allowed to vote on whether someone's answer counts or not. In match rounds, it's not that contentious, but does this item fit into that category? I know we have a bunch of famous examples.
The well-known airplane.
Yeah, is air
quandary.
In an airport? Is that what it is?
Oh, airport.
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Airport.
And then one was about bugs and spiders, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah,
is a spider a bug?
Which it's not. If you look up the actual definition,
I would love in the comments or email us. Let us know if you think a spider is a bug.
But essentially, what happens is you're trying to rally support for your bad answer, and then if someone votes for you in one round, then you try to cash in. They'll cash in later. Hey, I voted for you on that stupid answer. It becomes a really funny, loud, kind of meaner than it should be game. So if that doesn't sound, you'll know if this sounds fun to you.
Yeah.
Our group plays it all the time and really gets into the spirit of we're just sort of screaming at each other. And that is Sixes.
Okay, my number 35, another game by the Doctor. You keep trying to peek. This is, in my opinion, his best auction game. I know one of our listeners, Todd, is going to vehemently disagree because he's a big Raw fan. So sorry, Todd. But for me, my number 35 game is Modern Art. Modern Art is purely an auction game. What you're doing is there's 5 suits representing 5 different artists. I'd only played the older version where the art was a little lackluster, but the new version, the art is colorful and vibrant and really great. And so each card you have represents a piece of art by an artist, and all you're doing is you are auctioning off these pieces of art. And you can do it in one of 5 ways. It depends on the card. The card will tell you how that piece of art is auctioned, but it can be a once around, it can be a blind bid, it can be an open bid. There's 5 different types of auctions. And you keep doing that until the end of the round. And then the way scoring works in the game is the artist who has sold the most pieces of art scores the most points that round. And then second will score second, and third will score the third most. And then the artists who are finishing 4th and 5th place don't score at all. So you're trying to, in a thematic sense, I know this is certainly not the most thematic game, but you're trying to be like on the cutting edge of the art world is the idea. You're trying to like buy the best artists. And another thing I really like about this game is I think it plays 5 or 6 rounds, I'm not sure, but the values of the art that have accumulated in previous rounds go on for later rounds. So if an artist is worth 30,000 in the first round, that 30,000 will carry over and perhaps gain in value as rounds progress. But if they don't score first, second, or third most, if they don't sell the first, second, or third most paintings, they don't score at all. So there may be an artist that has like consistently scored and now the art is worth a lot. But if in that particular round you don't sell his art, he's not going to score at all. So it's again, a very interesting Knizia style, interesting scoring method. And it's just my favorite auction game. And the new edition is beautiful. And I just love it. So that's 35 Modern Arts.
This is on my shelf of shame. I really want to play it.
Yeah,
but it's like there are 4 different types of auctions.
There are 5 different types of auctions.
That's nuts, man.
I mean, if you want to auction, this is the auction game. You know what I mean? This is nothing but auctions.
Cool. My number 35 game is Agricola. We've spoken about this already. Agricola was, I think, my introduction to Uwe Rosenberg as a designer. And it's great. It's that sort of mean worker placement that we've already alluded to this episode, where there are spots that you sort of vitally need and you're sort of hoping that someone won't take them before you do. The aspect of like building fences to sort of house your animals is just satisfying from like a construction component. The one thing I will mention that I didn't mention when we were talking about earlier that I think Kalen sort of alluded to is I think the occupation cards are where this starts to wear on me a little. But the relative value of the cards and sort of knowing which cards are good as part of like the draft mechanic at the start of the game is something that bugs me a little bit.
Well, and you don't even, that's drafting is a variant, right?
That's not, I think that's how I've always done it.
Yeah, there's a couple different versions. There's one where everybody gets 10 cards and discards down to 7.
Oh, maybe I have done that.
And then
think of it.
there's other versions where you just draft every
right.
single card. The problem is the power levels of some of these cards are pretty disparate.
Yeah, exactly.
There's new editions of Agricola that I believe have been pruning out.
Okay, well, that's cool.
Some of that, which is nice.
It's like I feel like I like so much about Agricola, but just that one layer is the thing that sort of keeps pulling me away from it, because I just feel like you're never going to adequately sort of perform compared to someone that knows those cards extremely really well. But that's Agricola, my number 35.
It's a great game. I like it a lot. I had that at 50.
Yeah.
You like it more than me.
Maybe.
All right, my number 34, best game of all time, is Lords of Vegas. Lords of Vegas is frequently cited as sort of a Monopoly replacement, which I don't understand at all. In Lords of Vegas, everyone is building casinos. And you're building casinos similarly to sort of like a Chinatown-style board or an Acquire-style board, this grid. And you're building a casino and trying to sort of make money. But what's fun about the game is that you can actually gamble at each other's casinos. So you're jostling for casino. If 2 casinos connect, that forms sort of a takeover. And so one player will get to control that mega casino. And so you're jostling to have your casinos. There's an expansion that lets you build those casinos up into the air. But then truly my favorite mechanic is when you get behind, you say, well, I'm going to have to go to Mark's casino and we're going to try to make this right. And that involves rolling a bunch of dice, and Mark is likely to win, as most casinos operate, or as all casinos operate. But you have a chance, and that chance can turn the tides. This is a really, really thematic, fun game. I've replaced all the money with real poker chips. It's a ton of fun to bring it out. It's perhaps a little long, and I haven't played it in a few years. I don't know if either of you have played this, right?
I played it, yeah. I think
not
with you, I don't think, but I have played this.
I don't think you played it with me. Do you enjoy it at all?
Yeah, no, I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. Yeah.
It's one that I think is, once again, more than the sum of its parts. Somehow it comes together in this experience that I'm just laughing. You know, I had a famous game of it in my family where my brother and sister came down to the last die roll, and it was like, if it's 1, 2, or 3, Paxton wins. If it's 4, 5, or 6, Peyton wins. And my brother was so mad that this had happened. He lost, but even still, just the idea that the game could be decided by that is perfect. That's exactly Lords of Vegas. That's the whole point. Duh. It's a great game, but it's pretty silly.
Yeah, I really want to play this. My number 34 is by Thomas. I'm going to butcher his name. Deganius Lesperance. Thomas, you know who you are. This is Decrypto. It's a word game that is super simple and yet super clever. The way it's played is team versus team. And just the part that I cannot get over is that to start the game, you know the exact 4 words that your team is going to deal with the entire game. There's no like secret words. It's just the fact that you are shown these 4 words. The opponents don't see them, but you have these 4 words. And the words are numbered 1 through 4. And every turn, the clue giver is going to draw a card that will have 3 of those numbers in a particular order. So maybe 3, 1, 4 or 1, 2, 3, whatever. And they see this card secretly and they need to give clues to their teammates that will make them guess those words in that specific order. At the same time, the other team is listening in on the clues, and throughout the game, they are listening into more and more clues, and they're trying to figure out which clues lead to which numbers, and every round, they get to guess what number the clue is related to. So, if you start hearing a lot of clues that are color related, and the guesses have seemed to been going to number 4, you may guess, we think that's number 4. And if you match the exact order, you get a point where you steal a point. And the other way points are scored is a negative fashion. If in giving the clues to your teammates, if you try to get, because there gets a point in the game where you start getting very concerned that the other team is picking up on your clues, and you start trying to get cute with your clues, but you can't get too cute, because if your team incorrectly guesses the 3 words in the specific order, you get a negative point. And if you get either 2 negative points or the other team scores 2 interception points, they win. Maybe my description has clued you into this. It's a little hard to describe to new players. It's sort of notorious for that. It's one of the few games where I feel like you could say, let's just play a first round you'll get it. Yeah. But once you get it, it's so simple. But that, I don't know why. Maybe it's just a quirk of mine. But the fact that you can just see these 4 words, I just can't get over how obvious that is, but how clever that is. So for me, that's number 34, Decrypto.
Would you believe me if I told you that 34 was Decrypto?
There you go.
Well?
I should have hopped in.
I should have. I felt like just shouting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much more to say about it. It's a fantastic game. It's one of those games that sort of like feels like a Codenames replacement is maybe being too strong, but it's in the same vein, but it feels much more gamery.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot more stressful whenever you're the clue giver in it, because the clue giver just rotates.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know what I'm going to do that's not going to give this away.
Right.
Because it gets harder and harder as the game progresses as well. It's a really, really cool game, and I love it. This is actually one of only, I think, 3 games from 2018 on my list as well.
Okay.
So it's shooting up my list. It's a fantastic game.
Absolutely.
That's my number 34.
Better.
All right. We are now on to the 33rd best game of all time, and that game is Wiz-War. Wiz-War is a super silly game.
577.
These guys don't know what they're talking about. This is a classic game that has been around for many years, probably longer than you guys have been alive. Maybe it'll be close. Let's not look that up.
I've been around forever.
Wiz-War is a put wizards in a castle, give them a bunch of spells that feel like you're playing Magic the Gathering, and then beat each other up. What number are we at?
470. Not good.
These guys got wrecked in their first game and only game of Wiz-War, so do not listen to their voices of non-authority. Wiz-War has this fantastic ability to make everyone feel powerful on your turn. There is unlimited possibilities. Each card can be used for its spell, or it can be used to power up another spell. So you sit there and go, well, I really want to put Mark in a cage that he can't get out of.
Right.
But I also want to use this fireball, and it's sort of like, which should I do? The game devolves very frequently into just hitting each other and doing silly things, turning each other into giants, into freezing them or skip a turn sort of mechanics. The newest edition from Fantasy Flight, they kind of Care Beared it just a little bit. They added a lot of counter spells and made it a little easier to sort of maneuver your way through. But most people on the Board Game Geek forum have removed most of those cards to bring it back to its former glory. The intent of this is clearly a beer and pretzels game. It's we're going to set up and do funny things with cards, and it's going to take 45 minutes, and we're going to have a great time. I think it succeeds. I think it's a triumph in that regard. But you have to know what you're getting into, and you have to have gamery friends. I'm a little surprised you guys don't like it more, just given the fact that we are the perfect audience to play it.
Right. For me, it's just a little too janky. It's a little too, I don't know. feels like not coupled together, but I get that sense. Like it feels a little too off. I like that, but it's just a little too much for me.
There were moments where I felt you could do fun things, but a lot of the times I was like, I don't want to do any of these things in my hand. It didn't feel like consistent at delivering what I wanted from it.
Right, but some of the things that we did in the game were like
it's
hilarious.
Funny
like,
as heck.
Yeah, didn't we have like somebody like burst through
a wall? Yeah.
Somebody thought they were safe, and then they burst through a wall. And there's like a thing where you can like flood the board with water.
Or rotate. So someone thinks they're right by the treasure, and then you just rotate the entire map that they're on.
Right.
It's so funny.
I'm gonna move it up to 469. Convince me.
Just from this
That's right.
nostalgic.
You sold me.
Nice.
My number 33 is by Jens Dogmuller and Helge Ostertag, who came together again for Gaia Project. This is their. I haven't played Gaia Project, so I'm listing their former game, Terra Mystica, as my number 33. This is a area control route builder sort of game. Again, asymmetry, which shows up a lot on my list. Each faction has a lot of asymmetric powers. I like the fact that there's a give and take. And I don't know if this is the same in Gaia Project, but you get bonuses when you build your buildings close to other characters. But you also when you do that, you risk getting hemmed in.
That's exactly it. Like you're incentivized to sort of get close to other players,
right?
But it's obviously dangerous.
Right,
to do that.
exactly. This is a classic. I know it's top 10 on BGG. It's very thinky, very well designed. They don't have the terraforming thing anymore in Gaia Project, right?
No, that's there.
Oh, it is still there. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing I like, the fact that you can basically go to any spot you want, but you may have to pay a cost, and you can try to get more efficient in paying a cost. This is just a really fun, super heavy Euro where I think the biggest sell is, aside from the asymmetric powers, this thing I was talking about you want to rub up against your opponents in terms of spatially, but you risk getting cut off, and that can be brutal. So I'm excited to play Gaia Project one of these days, but for right now, Terra Mystica is my number 33.
Terra Mystica was a weird one. It didn't make my list, but it was very, very close. There's something about the restriction of, like you were saying, like the way you can get hemmed in that feels a little bit harsh sometimes. And also some of the aspects, like the ability to transport, you have to build up your river transport in order to do things. Right. There were some things that felt a little bit weird to me in Terra Mystica. I didn't play it probably as much as it deserves, but yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It's like the heavier the Euro game, though, the more that the asymmetric factions need to be balanced.
Right.
And I think
these are not balanced.
Yeah, Terra Mystica is famously very unbalanced,
right.
I think.
Yeah. But it also, I mean, it's definitely a problem, but it also, when you're playing against people who are less or more experienced, you can sort of like nerf them that way.
Yeah. But that's actually in some ways where it gets weirder, because if you were playing it with people that are very experienced, they have pretty good stats on like how you would adjust victory points values for each faction.
Yes,
but that probably goes away when you're playing with new players, because who can say?
Yes, right.
It's a hard thing.
Because in tournaments you bid in victory points. To choose your faction.
Yeah.
This is an interesting game. It's weird that they're doing another expansion for it.
Yeah.
Even though
Gaia Project.
Right.
Yeah.
And that the expansion's not compatible with the other Terra Mystica expansion.
Fire Nice, yeah.
Is it interesting?
Strange.
My number 33 game is Soul. I didn't write down the subtitle. So is it Last Days of a Dying Star?
Sounds right.
Last Days of a Star.
Of a Star. Yeah.
We mentioned this already. This is fantastic. It's one of the few games that sort of really speaks to me thematically. I love science fiction movies, and this feels like you're playing a science fiction movie. The things that maybe we didn't mention, there's this pattern forming component that I really like, where you're sort of trying to align your ships into specific shapes in order to create structures, which is, it's just like an interesting little puzzle that I liked. But the way you described that the motherships move around the circle, so good. So good. Yeah. The other thing that I really like is, to some extent, the game is largely decided and determined by the 5 different card powers you have. So almost every game feels completely different, based just on those 5 cards. That's almost entirely the extent of what you can do with the cards in your hand is just dictated by the 5 powers you draw for that game. So it feels radically different every single time.
And I like the fact that you only can ever keep one card.
Right.
So it's not like you have a hand of cards and you're debating what to do, or there's only ever one thing that you can do.
Yeah. Really, really cool game. That's Sol, Last Days of a Star.
My 32nd best game of all time is
Wow.
This is a Paco game. This is a cooperative game, a cooperative word game. Wow, I'm saying it. You have every letter of the alphabet. The vowels are out of the deck, and you're trying to form words together without talking. So it leads to really silly situations where someone is trying to spell a specific word and you don't understand what they're trying to get you to spell. What I love about this is that it fits. These pack of games are literally, about this size of a pack of gum. The cards are super small and cute. The game is very clever and does not overstay its welcome. It's one of those ones that I'd recommend to almost anyone as a good modern game to have in their collection. Neilan's even borrowing it to take it home.
Yeah, so exactly. It seems like the perfect little game to take on a holiday because it's tiny.
It's just every time I play it and every subsequent time I played it, I think, oh, this is a little bit more clever than I remember it from the last time. And for a filler game, that's quite good. You pull out some of these filler games that you've played once and then you play it again and you're like, yeah, that was the exact same thing as what happened last time.
Is 32 and Biblios doesn't make your list?
That's right.
As a filler game?
I'm 100% serious.
Is a travesty.
I don't even know how to spell
justice.
It's either SHH or SSH, but it's better than Biblios.
That is so wrong. My number 32, Mr. Rosenberg makes a reappearance. This is Le Havre. Again, this is back to his resource management conversion. What I love about this is how, again, tightly designed this is. It's a little looser than Agricola, but it's tight in a different way. What you're doing on your turn is you are moving your ship down this track. The track indicates how long a round lasts, and you're just filling the resource spots where your ship landed. So these resources are slowly building up, but on your turn, you can do one of two things. You can pick up one of these resources that have been filled up, and you just take it, or there's a worker placement aspect to it, which is the other thing you can do, and you're placing your one worker. So you only ever have one worker throughout the whole game. And you can either place them on your own buildings, which you've bought with the resources you've gathered. And if you do that, you get whatever the building gives, or you make the conversion or whatever you want to do, but you do it for free. However, you can also place your worker on the communal spots, which represent the town, or on any of your opponent's spots, which is a very, again, a sort of a tacky, interesting mechanism. Although if you go to the town or to your opponents, you have to pay them some amount of gold or food or whatever. What's cool about that, though, is in addition to being able to use your opponent's spots, which I always like in a game where when you can jump into an opponent's tableau, like sort of Keyflower, that whole thing, is the fact that you can jump into your opponent's building and you can just sit there for round to round. Now, you don't continue to get the resource, but you block them from getting the resource. Mm-hmm. So that's like an interesting thing. The only way that they can dislodge you at that point is to actually sell this building to the city. So like if they really want it, they can force you out. But it's just really interesting in that respect. The fact that you only have one worker, you're only doing one thing, very simple. You don't have to overanalyze. There's a feed your workers thing, which is a hallmark for Rosenberg games, which is done really well in this game. And it's just, I've only played it a couple times, but I just loved my plays, and I think this is a game that definitely feels like it's going to move up my list. It feels like the perfect level of Rosenberg resource gathering management conversion. So 32 for me is Le Havre.
My number 32 game is Orléans. This is a bag building engine game. The premise being you start with 4 basic workers and you have an action board where you can spend those workers in order to sort of get more. These workers are all in the form of chips that just go into your bag, and every round you're going to draw a certain number of them and decide how you're going to allocate those onto your action spaces. So one action space might require a white chip and a blue chip, which represent different workers, or one might require a different combination. So then based on what you draw, you would assign those to different actions and then perform those actions in sequence. This is all in service of, like I said, getting more workers, more chips to put into your bag, perhaps increasing how many you're going to draw in a given round, getting guys that will give you sort of more victory points. There is sort of a board that you can turn chips in, which you'd probably do towards the end of the game in order to sort of get points and sort of other rewards. This is a game that I really, really enjoy. There is, like any sort of deck builder, there's a randomness to the, hoping you're going to get the things that you're going to need. But I really enjoy this one. It's always been super satisfying to play. I've never felt like the randomness has sort of really detracted from my enjoyment of the game. Yeah, that's Orléans.
I'm a big fan of Orléans.
What I find super interesting about this is how much it seems to have been enhanced by expansions as well.
Yeah.
I think you were saying that is it the Trade and Intrigue
Yes.
expansion that adds a cooperative?
Yeah, which is supposed to be very,
Yeah.
very good. And the other one, which is no, that's the Invasion. Invasion does that.
Okay.
Does that. But Trade and Intrigue changes the main board
Yeah.
in a very positive
Right.
way. Introduces some other things. Yeah, it's really a really good game. Really good expansions.
Yeah, that's Orléans.
My number 31 best game of all time is Keyflower. Keyflower is so good and manages to be a Euro-ish game that still feels highly, highly interactive. What happens in a game of Keyflower is that you are bidding to acquire the hexagons in the middle of the board. But you can only bid with one of 3 different colors, and there's a 4th sort of special color. But if I start a bid with red, Mark can only fight me for that space with red workers as well. And what that does is everybody has sort of a random assortment of what colors they start a round with. So you can kind of know maybe that Mark doesn't have any red, and Mark and I are going to be the 2 that are fighting over this, and sort of get out early, put a worker out there so that he can't go after that space. And so each round you're bidding to get these hexagons that then go into your board, and then you can upgrade them. If that was the only tension to it, it would be great, but you actually are also balancing another tension, which is you can spend workers to actually just use the tile. So you can bid to acquire the tile for subsequent rounds, or you can just say, I'm going to use the tile. This has similar to Le Havre. It allows you to use tiles in other players' areas, but then they get that meeple for the subsequent round. So you have to balance, is this worth me getting what I need right now, but helping Mark on a future turn? The sort of Euro-y engine underneath and the tile placement, I'm a little less sold on, but this upfront mechanic of how you are acquiring the hexagons makes it so good and so tense the entire way through. That is Keyflower. What do you guys think of Keyflower?
I like Keyflower a lot. I think the only reason it didn't make my list is because the time I played it, we were perhaps playing by slightly funky rules.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know exactly how the actual game would feel, but I really want to play it more. It's a game that I've almost picked up for myself this year. I'm really excited to play more of it.
The one thing I don't like so much about it is the movement aspect.
Yeah.
Where you have to move around your tableau. But it is a fantastic game.
And that's actually one of those interesting things, because when I was thinking of getting Keyflower, like Key to the City that we spoke about at some point, doesn't have that sort of root building thing.
Yeah.
But it also shaves off enough of the other edges that I don't think it's quite the right replacement.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, I'm not sure which of those I would prefer in the long run.
That's Keyflower.
All right, for my number 31, I'm going to break the Codenames seal. I know it's going to appear on, I don't know, but I think it's going to appear on everybody's list. But for me, it's 31, Vlada Shavato.
Okay. Probably.
I mean, this is a classic. I feel silly explaining it because if anybody watching this or listening to this podcast knows all about it. It's sort of been called Password meets Battleship. You have a grid of words in front of you, team versus team game. You're trying to get your team to guess the words without having them accidentally guess the opponent's clues or the assassin card, which will end the game. This is, I think I've called a number of games classics, but I think this is the most classic of the new classics. This is a game I think that will appear in like complete non-gamers like game collection,
Sure.
a la, Sorry and Scrabble and stuff like that. This is like just, you can introduce it to anybody, any circumstance, and it'll be a hit. I've introduced it to plenty of non-gamers. They all love it. We never played just one game. We always run it back. Codenames. I mean, you need to have it, basically. Yeah.
I think also it definitely has like the requisite legs that we're going to be talking about this game years and years from now. But
For
people, once it starts getting out to the general populace, as it were.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
That's 31 Codenames.
My number 31 is Gaia Project.
Oh, okay.
So this did make my list. It's funny because one of the things I need to sort of hedge when I talk about Gaia Project is it does actually add some complications to Terra Mystica, but it also shaves off some of the things I don't like about Terra Mystica. So this is the pseudo-sequel, the spiritual successor to Terra Mystica by the same designers. It is space-themed, which also probably goes a long way to sort of to saying why I like it. It's possible for me to say whether the factions are more balanced, but what I do like about the new map for the game is it's just sort of areas of space just sparsely populated with planets. So there doesn't feel like there's this strong getting hedged in by other players. There's always a way that even if you're sort of on one side of the map to sort of terraform a planet on the other side of the map and sort of just move to there.
Okay.
At a huge expense of resources, but you never feel like you're completely trapped in. It also sort of makes the river transport system a little bit more elegant by just reducing that to distances. And it sort of introduces this super resource that you can spend to sort of boost your distance, like I said, if you need to sort of emergency exit out of a sector. It also adds this it turns the cult track, which I think is something that is kind of divisive in Terra Mystica, especially at 2 players. I think it gets a little bit weird. It turns into this massive sort of tech tree where a lot of like the mechanics, like the river transport in Terra Mystica, become just text on this board.
Okay.
So it takes a lot of the elements and puts them into one place. And this tech tree, well, not a tree, but this tech board is fantastic. It's like these 6 sort of levels of technology that you move up as you sort of build your, I forget what they're called, the research centers, which are like the universities in Terra Mystica, I think. It feels like a refinement in all ways I like, and it's a game that I was immediately much more willing to want to go back to than Terra Mystica. That is Gaia Project.
You spend more time, though, looking at your own player board and doing a puzzle than you do caring about the main board.
I don't think that's true at all. No, I don't think. I mean, Terra Mystica, I think board placement is vital. Gaia Project less so, but it's certainly you're hot competing for these spots. I mean, there aren't that many of them, and especially like depending on the way the scoring has been sort of engineered for that game, like certain colored planets might be very important. You're desperately hoping that someone else at the table isn't going to have the means to go to a planet before you do, or if they do, you want to be able to maybe get close enough to them that you'll benefit off of them. The board playing interactivity is strong. I wouldn't say it's not necessarily really a highly interactive game because a large part of what you're doing is trying to optimize your player mat. But I think the competition for space is a big part of it for sure.
I don't know that I agree with you. I feel like any game where you are like you see what you want to do on the board, but then you have to look at another player board and sort of solve a math puzzle to figure out if you can do that.
I don't think you would ever be looking at someone's player board. It's necessarily. I don't know.
No, looking at your own player board and trying to like, how can I do that thing and let me solve 7 math problems here in order to do one thing
on
there.
the board. Yeah.
And that's why I don't care for Terra Mystica. I've not played Gaia Project, but that's what it felt like the couple of times I played.
Yeah,
Terra
that's
Mystica.
fair. And also, it's worth clarifying that I also don't think that if you hated Terra Mystica, Gaia Project doesn't solve the things that you hate about it. Like, it refines it in a way that sort of makes it better for me. But so it's certainly largely the same game. That's Gaia Project, and that's gonna do it for this episode. That it was our 40 to 31 picks. So 3 more parts as we get to number 1
They
on
only
our
get
top
better.
50 list. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. As always, please check us out on our social media. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Join the discussion on our guild. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/guild. We talk about the episodes there. It's a good place to sort of reach out to us. We're pretty active on there and on Reddit as well. Otherwise, thank you so much, as always, to Heart Society for letting us use their song What's in Your Mind, Kid as our intro and outro music. You can check them out at heartsocietymusic.com. That's going to do it for the episode. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
I
I'm hot. I'm ready. I want you to save me from myself, baby. There's a story.
It's magic time.
Magic. Go, go, go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Board Game Barrage.